The hour of convening having arrived, all members will please report to their assigned seats. All members of the House will please report to their seats. Mr. Clerk, would you ring the bell, please? We're about to have the morning roll call. All members present will please vote green to signify their presence in the chamber, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. Doorkeepers will please close the doors and keep them closed. Good morning. What a beautiful day out there today. We will begin our day with scripture reading and prayer by the chaplain, after which we will pledge allegiance to the flag of our country. Our chaplain this morning will be introduced by the gentleman from the 141st House District, Representative Dale Washburn. Representative Washburn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, it's a pleasure for me today to introduce Dr. Tim Mccoy as our chaplain of the day. Dr. Mccoy is the lead pastor of Ingleside Baptist Church in Macon, where he has served for more than 31 years. Ingleside is a leading church among Georgia Baptists with a pre-pandemic attendance each Sunday of more than 2,000 worshipers, and is a pace setter in missions both locally, nationally, and internationally. Dr. Mccoy is a summa cum laude graduate of Louisiana College, earning a Bachelor of Arts degree in religion in 1980. He also earned the Master of Divinity and Doctor of Philosophy degrees from the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. Dr. Mccoy currently serves on the Board of Trustees of his alma mater, Southern Seminary, and previously served as both member and chairman of the Board of Trustees of the International Mission Board of the Southern Baptist Convention. Dr. Mccoy was born in Tupelo, Mississippi. He and his wife, Beverly Brown Mccoy, from Charlotte, North Carolina, will be married 34 years next month. I am honored for Dr. Mccoy to be my pastor. Donna and I have been in his church for about 16 years now, I think. Dr. McCoy's story to me is a very interesting one, and I'll only take a couple of minutes with this. Dr. McCoy was headed toward a career in industrial engineering and was doing an internship with Lockheed and was well on the way to doing that when he felt the call to a higher calling, and he felt called of God to enter the ministry. And so he changed his direction, and he did that. Dr. McCoy has many skills. He is a visionary. He is a great administrator, a great organizer, and God has used all those talents in what he has done at Ingleside Baptist Church. When he came there were 1,500 members approximately, and today there are over 5,000. One thing I've learned in my life, ladies and gentlemen, is that God's truth is always in season. And Dr. McCoy, with all of his other talents and abilities, with everything God has done to bless him and use him in the successful ministry at Ingleside, he is always faithful to the truth. And I am sure We will hear that truth from him today. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to introduce our chaplain of the day, Dr. Tim Mccoy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the invitation to be chaplain of the day. It's an honor to be here with you, sir, and to serve you and this distinguished body in this significant role. And I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your service and devotion to the citizens of our great state. And Representative Washburn, let me say thanks to you for such kind words in that introduction. You know, I sort of wish my parents, who are both in heaven now, could have been here to hear those generous remarks. My daddy would have enjoyed them, and my mother would have believed them. And so I want to say thank you, Dale. It's a privilege to be here with you today, and it's an honor to be your pastor and your friend. And now for everyone here this morning, may I pose just a handful of questions? And before we're done, may I offer a gift for you all. Here are the questions, just a handful. Number one, where do you turn? Where do you turn when you need refreshment and renewal for your soul? Number two, where do you turn when you need more wisdom and more insight than you currently possess? Number three, where do you turn when you need burdens lifted and a fresh infusion of energy and joy? Number four, where do you turn when you need sharper vision, the ability to see more clearly and comprehensively, and the ability to envision a better tomorrow and the pathway to get there? And number five, finally, where do you turn when you're trying to discern what is true and what is right and what is best? In light of these questions, I want to encourage you to hear the words of Scripture with me from Psalm chapter 19, where the Bible says these words: "The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The rules of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, even much fine gold, sweeter also than honey and drippings of the honeycomb. Moreover, by them is your servant warned, and in keeping them there is great reward." Did you hear it? The Bible says that if you need revival for your soul, if you need wisdom for your mind, if you need new joy for your heart and new light for your eyes, the place to turn is to the word of the Lord. So, may I ask you about your habits this morning? Habits are important, are they not? In fact, one observer got it right when he said, "We make our habits and then they make us." Isn't that true? And so let me ask you about your habits today, especially just one habit. Have you yet developed the habit of turning every day to Scripture, to take it in, to meditate on it, to apply it to your own life, this precious truth of God's Word. More than once, Jesus spoke directly to the importance of this habit. Do you remember in Matthew's Gospel where Jesus said, "Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God"? It means that just as we need daily nourishment from physical food, we need daily nourishment of spiritual food. In John's Gospel, Jesus put it this way. You'll know at least some of these words. He said, "If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples." Here it is. "And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Everyone has heard the latter part of those words of Jesus, but don't miss the predicate. Don't miss the premise. He says, if you abide in my word, you'll know this truth, and the truth will set you free. So, may I ask again, what about you? Have you developed the habit yet in your life of turning to Scripture every day? Do you allow God to mentor you from His Word? That's where my gift comes in. I want to offer to everyone listening today a free subscription to a mobile, digital Bible engagement tool called A Chapter a Day. It'll come right to your phone every morning at 5 o'clock. It'll identify the chapter. It'll have a hyperlink to the Bible page where the chapter will be read aloud to you if you like. And it'll always have a few comments to help you understand and apply what you have read. You know, I've been a pastor for more than 30 years, and I've rarely met anyone who hasn't said, "Oh, Pastor, I would love to know the truth of God's Word and apply it to my life." But so many of us have found that difficult to develop and maintain. So how do you get this tool? You can just pull out your phone right now and text the word chapter to 22828. That's the word chapter to 22828. Sign up, and you can join literally thousands of Georgians in this journey through the Bible, just a chapter a day. I want to say as I conclude this morning, no one will ever regret the time invested learning to listen for God's voice through the Scripture each day, because God has promised to use the truth of Scripture to transform our lives for our good and for His great glory. Shall we pray together this morning? Let's stand. Father, we bow our heads before you today, acknowledging that our hearts are sometimes dry and weary, and we need renewal and revival and refreshment in our soul. Lord, we need more wisdom than we currently have, more light than we currently have, more joy than we sometimes have. And I thank you, O Lord, that you've promised to meet us by your Spirit through your word to transform our hearts for our good and for your glory. And so, Lord, I want to pray that those who've already developed this habit would continue it with joy, and those who've not yet made their way into your presence each day through your word would begin to do so today. I thank you for every member of this august chamber, for the work that they do. I pray your rich blessings on them. I ask that you would open the windows of heaven and pour out on them every blessing that can come from your hand. Father, don't withhold any good thing from these members as they walk in obedience to you. And Lord, we offer this prayer with thanksgiving for your grace and your gospel, that you so loved the world that you gave your Son Jesus, that whoever believes in him would not perish but have everlasting life. And it's with thanksgiving in our hearts that we do pray. Amen. And now would you join me in pledging allegiance to the flag? Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Doorkeepers will unlock the doors. Chair recognizes Chairman Hogan, the chair of the Committee on Information and Audits.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Information and Audits has read the journal of the previous legislative day and found it to be correct. And furthermore, Mr. Speaker, a woman visiting her husband in prison, before leaving, she tells the correctional officer, "You shouldn't make my husband work like that. He's exhausted." The officer laughed and said, "Are you kidding? He just eats and sleeps and stays in his cell." The wife replied, "He just told me he's been digging a tunnel for months."
Is there any objection to our Chairman Hogan, the chair of the Committee on Information and Audits, reports that the journal of the previous legislative day has been read and found to be correct. Is there any objection to the confirmation of the journal? The chair hears none, and the journal is confirmed. The clerk will read the resolution establishing the order of business for the day.
Mr. Burns, on our 59th moves the following be established as the order of business in our first part of the period unanimous consents. Introduction to bills and resolutions, first reading and reference of House bills and resolutions, second reading of bills and resolutions, reports of standing committees, first reading and reference of Senate bills and resolutions, morning orders.
Is there any objection to the adoption of the resolution establishing the order of business for the day? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. First reading of bills and resolutions, the clerk will read.
House Bill 35 by Representative Scott of the 76th, McLeod of the 105th, Beverly the 143rd, Schofield the 60th, and Davis the 87th, and others. Bill being titled Act to amend Title 35 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to law enforcement officers and agencies.
Public Safety and Homeland Security.
House Bill 595 by Representative Green of the 151st. Bill being titled Act to amend the Act reconstituting the Board of Education of Clay County.
Intergovernmental Coordination.
House Bill 596 by Representative Green of the 151st. Bill being titled Act to amend Title 40 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to motor vehicles and traffic.
Motor Vehicles.
House Bill 597 by Representative Singleton of the 71st, Wade of the 9th, and Gilligan of the 24th. Bill being titled Act to amend Article 4, Chapter 11, Title 16 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to dangerous instrumentalities and practices.
Judiciary.
House Bill 598 by Representative Gullett of the 19th, Moptown of the 17th, Walensky the 79th, Smith of the 18th, Wiedauer of the 119th, and others. Bill being titled Act to amend Code Section 33, 7, 11 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to uninsured motorist coverage.
Special Committee on Access to the Civil Justice System.
House Bill 599 by Representative Thomas, the 21st, Carson, the 46th, and Ballinger, the 23rd. Bill be titled an act to amend an act reincorporating and recreating the city of Woodstock.
Intergovernmental coordination.
House Bill 600 by Representative Dreyer, the 59th, and Schofield, the 60th. Bill be titled an act to amend an act to provide a new charter for the city of Hapeville.
Intergovernmental coordination.
House Bill 601 by Representative Stevens, the 164th. Bill be titled an act to amend Title 16 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to crimes and offenses.
Judiciary non-civil.
House Bill 602 by Representative Stevens, the 164th. Bill be titled an act to amend an act providing for the election of members of the Board of Education of Bryan County.
Intergovernmental coordination.
House Bill 603 by Representative Meeks, the 178th. Bill be titled an act to amend an act creating the Board of Commissioners of Brantley County.
Intergovernmental coordination.
House Bill 604 by Representative Scoggins, the 14th, Campbell, the 15th, and Kelly, the 16th. Bill be titled an act to provide a homestead exemption for Bartow County School District ad valorem taxes.
Intergovernmental coordination.
House Bill 606 by Representative Nixon, the 69th, Dickey, the 140th, Yurda, the 152nd, Belton, the 112th, and Chocus, the 138th. Bill be titled an act to amend Code Section 23, 519, the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to definitions regarding Hope scholarships.
Education.
House Bill 607 by Representative Bennett, the 94th, Belton, of the 112th, Jackson, the 64th, Frazier, the 126th, Lewis Ward, of the 109th, and others. Bill be titled an act to amend Article 2 of Chapter 7, Title 48, the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to imposition rate computation and exemptions from state income taxes.
Ways and means.
House Bill 608 by Representative Wiedauer, the 119th, Burns, the 159th, Smyrie, 135th, Parsons, the 44th, Kelly, the 16th, and others. Bill be titled an act to amend Title 50, the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to state government.
Governmental affairs.
House Bill 609 by Representative Gullett, the 19th, Moore, the 95th, Walensky, the 79th, Jones, the 25th, Scoggins, the 14th. Bill be titled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 11 of Title 4, the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to animal protection generally.
Agriculture and consumer affairs.
House Bill 610 by Representative Dickey, the 140th, Washburn, the 141st, Beverly, the 143rd, Mathis, the 144th, and Paris, the 142nd. Bill be titled an act to amend an act to provide for the restructuring of the city of Macon.
Intergovernmental coordination.
House Bill 611 by Representative Chocus, the 138th, Laricchia, the 169th, Stevens, the 164th, Werkheiser, the 157th, Powell, the 32nd, and others. Bill be titled an act to amend Part 3 of Article 3 of Chapter 5 of Title 50, the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to small business assistance.
Small business development.
House Bill 612 by Representative Blackman of the 146th, Clark of the 147th, Mathis, the 144th, Williams, the 148th, and Collins, the 68th. Bill be titled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 47 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to the Employees Retirement System of Georgia.
Retirement.
House Bill 613 by Representative Blackman of the 146th, Dickey, the 140th, Clark of the 147th, and Williams, the 148th. Bill be titled an act to authorize the governing authority of the City of Perry to levy an excise tax.
Intergovernmental coordination.
House Bill 614 by Representative Mathiak of the 73rd, Knight of the 130th, Singleton of the 71st, Bond of the 72nd, Camp of the 131st, and others. Bill be titled an act to revise certain provisions governing the Griffin Judicial Circuit.
Judiciary.
House Bill 615 by Representative Jones, the 25th. Bill be titled the act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 21 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to elections and primaries generally.
Special Committee on Election Integrity.
House Bill 616 by Representative Barr, the 103rd, Chocus, the 138th, Stevens, the 164th, Werkheiser, the 157th, Powell, the 32nd, and others. Bill be titled an act to amend Chapter 25 of Title 50 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to the Georgia Technology Authority.
Small business development.
House Bill 617 by Representative Martin of the 49th, Rhodes, the 120th, Fleming, the 121st, and Smyrie, the 135th. Bill be titled an act to amend Chapter 3 of Title 20, the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to post-secondary education.
Higher education.
House Resolution 210 by Representative Scott of the 76th, Beverly, the 143rd, Smyrie, the 135th, Mitchell, the 88th, Williams, the 168th, and others. A resolution urging Congress to enact the John Lewis Civil Rights Voting Act.
Rules.
House Resolution 211 by Representative Evans of the 83rd, Parker, the 101st, Williams, the 37th, Schofield, the 60th, and Scott of the 76th. A resolution urging the Governor of Georgia to join the United States Climate Alliance.
Natural resources and environment.
House Resolution 212 by Representative Williams, the 145th. A resolution honoring the life of Miss Danette Odom Jackson and dedicating a bridge in her memory.
Transportation.
Senate Bill 40 by Senator Jordan of the 6th, Iowa the 48th. Merit of the 9th, Jones the 22nd, Parent of the 42nd, and others. Bill be titled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 21 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to elections and primaries generally.
Special Committee on Election Integrity.
Senate Bill 67 by Senator Walker, the 20th, Miller, the 49th, Mullis, the 53rd, Kennedy, the 18th, Gooch, the 51st, and others. Bill being titled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 21, the official code of Georgia and Taylor relating to elections and primaries generally.
Special Committee on Election Integrity.
Senate Bill 184 by Senator Cowser to the 46th, Miller to the 49th, Dugan to the 30th, Gooch to the 51st, and Kennedy to the 18th. Bill being titled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 21, the official code of Georgia and Taylor relating to elections and primaries generally.
Special Committee on Election Integrity.
Senate Bill 188 by Senator Cowser to the 46th, Miller to the 49th, Dugan to the 30th, Gooch to the 51st, Kennedy to the 18th, and others. Bill being titled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 21, the official code of Georgia and Taylor relating to elections and primaries generally.
Special Committee on Election Integrity.
That completes first readers.
Second reading of bills and resolutions. The clerk will read.
House Bill 574 by Representative Camp of the 131st, Cameron of the 1st, Hill of the 3rd, Houston of the 170th, Jenkins of the 132nd, and others. A bill relating to licenses for pet dealers and kennel, stable, or animal shelter operators, equipment, issuance, and application. House Bill 575 by Representative Dickey of the 140th, Watson of the 172nd, Perkle of the 155th, Holmes of the 129th, a bill relating to bona fide conservation use property. House Bill 576 by Representative Rhodes of the 120th, Gamble of the 15th, Corbett of the 174th, a bill relating to contracts and purchases by public schools. House Bill 577 by Representative Carpenter of the 4th, Jaspers of the 11th, Burns of the 159th, Anolich of the 42nd, Wiedauer of the 119th, the bill relating to highways, bridges, and ferries and maximum speed limits. House Bill 578 by Representative McLaurin of the 51st, Dukes of the 154th, Hutchinson of the 107th, Wynn of the 89th, Paris of the 142nd, a bill relating to general provisions regarding torts. House Bill 579 by Representative Oliver of the 82nd, F. Stration of the 104th, Wilson of the 80th, Drenner of the 85th, Lopez of the 86th, and others, a bill relating to war on terrorism, local assistance. House Bill 580 by Representative McLaurin of the 51st, Fry of the 118th, Smyer of the 135th, a bill relating to public officers and employees. House Bill 581 by Representative Mumtahan of the 17th, Smith of the 18th, Holcomb of the 81st, Jackson of the 128th, Bentley of the 139th, and others, a bill relating to insurance. House Bill 582 by Representative Ballinger of the 23rd, Carson of the 46th, Thomas of the 21st, Byrd of the 20th, Cantrell of the 22nd, a bill to provide that future elections of the office of probate judge of Cherokee County shall be nonpartisan elections. House Bill 583 by Representative Wilkerson of the 38th, Schofield of the 60th, Burnell of the 77th, Scott of the 76th, Davis of the 87th, and others, a bill relating to employment security. House Bill 584 by Representative Bodie of the 62nd, McLean of the 100th, Buckner of the 137th, Beverly of the 143rd, Schofield of the 60th, and others, a bill relating to general provisions relative to labor and industrial relations. House Bill 585 by Representative Bodie of the 62nd, Prince of the 127th, Alexander of the 66th, Jackson of the 64th, Mallett of the 163rd, a bill relating to special license plates. House Bill 586 by Representative Watson of the 172nd, Corbett of the 174th, Houston of the 170th, Blackman of the 146th, Richard of the 97th, a bill relating to general provisions regarding sales and use taxes. House Bill 587 by Representative Williamson of the 115th, Reeves of the 134th, Blackman of the 146th, Jaspers of the 11th, Fry of the 118th, and others, a bill relating to revenue and taxation. House Bill 588 by Representative Jaspers of the 11th, Burns of the 159th, Hatchett of the 150th, Smyre of the 135th, Ballinger of the 23rd, and others, a bill relating to highways, bridges, and ferries. House Bill 589 by Representative Gamble of the 15th, Irwin of the 28th, Glanson of the 75th, Wade of the 9th, and Richard of the 97th, a bill relating to education accountability assessment programs. House Bill 590 by Representative Hogan of the 179th, Oliver of the 82nd, Williams of the 148th, LaHood of the 175th, Blackman of the 146th, and others, a bill relating to mental health. House Bill 591 by Representative Hogan of the 179th, Williams of the 148th, Meeks of the 178th, Buckner of the 137th, Collins of the 68th, and others, a bill relating to mental health. House Bill 592 by Representative Wilson of the 80th, Beverly of the 143rd, Wilkerson of the 38th, McLean of the 100th, Schofield of the 60th, and others, a bill relating to COVID-19 pandemic business safety. House Bill 593 by Representative Blackman of the 146th, Williamson of the 115th, Martin of the 49th, Knight of the 130th, Stevens of the 164th, and others, bill relating to imposition rate computation and exemptions from state income tax. House Bill 594 by Representative Carpenter of the 4th, Carson of the 46th, Dollar of the 45th, Knight of the 130th, Blackman of the 146th, a bill relating to sales and use taxes. House Bill 605 by Representative Cooper of the 43rd, a bill relating to care and protection of indigent and elderly patients. House Resolution 202 by Representative Maynard of the 56th, Glanton of the 75th, Lim of the 99th, Evans of the 83rd, Mallow of the 163rd. Resolution urging the Georgia General Assembly to adopt Wesley International Academy. House Resolution 203 by Representative McLaurin of the 51st, Allen of the 40th, Couch of the 50th, Oliver of the 82nd, Holcomb of the 81st. Resolution proposing amendment to the Constitution so as to provide that taxes on motor fuels shall be appropriated for any and all public transportation purposes. House Bill Resolution 204 by Representative Gilliard of the 162nd, Stevens of the 164th, Williams of the 168th, Petrie of the 166th, Oliver of the 82nd. Resolution recognizing Judge Willie J. Lovett Jr. and dedicating a building in his memory. Senate Resolution 28 by Senator Calvert of the 46th, Gooch of the 51st, Duggan of the 30th, Miller of the 49th, Anniversary of the 31st, and others. A resolution requesting that the United States Congress call a convention under Article 5 of the Constitution of the United States. Senate Resolution 29 by Senator Couser of the 46th, Gooch of the 51st, Duggan of the 30th, Kennedy of the 18th, Miller of the 49th, and others. Resolution applying for a convention of the states under Article 5 of the United States Constitution. 3 second readers.
Reports of standing committees. The clerk will read.
Representative Heath Clark of the 147th District, Chairman of the Committee on Defense and Veteran Affairs, submitted the following report. Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Defense and Veteran Affairs has set under consideration the following resolution to the House. It instructed me to report same back to the House. The following recommendations. House Resolution 77 do pass. Respectfully submitted, Representative Heath Clark of the 147th District, Chairman. Representative Don Parsons, the 44th District Chairman of the Committee on Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications, submitted the following report. Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications has had under consideration the following bills of the House. It instructed me to report the same back to the House. The following recommendations. House Bill 449 do pass. Respectfully submitted, Representative Don Parsons, the 44th District Chairman. Representative Cooper, the 43rd District Chairman of the Committee on Health and Human Services, submitted the following report. Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Health and Human Services had under consideration the following bills of the House. Instructed me to report the same back to the House. The following recommendations. House Bill 271 do pass by committee substitute. House Bill 370 do pass. House Bill 437 do pass by committee substitute. House Bill 458 do pass by committee substitute. House Bill 539 do pass. Respectfully submitted, Representative Cooper, the 43rd District Chairman. Representative Lumsden of the 12th District Chairman of the Committee on Insurance submitted the following report. Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Insurance has had in consideration the following bills of the House. Instructed me to report same back to the House. Following recommendations. House Bill 303 do pass. House Bill 509 do pass. Respectfully submitted, Representative Lumsden of the 12th District Chairman. Representative Chuck Efstration of the 104th District Chairman of the Committee on Judiciary submitted the following report. Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration the following bills of the House. Instructed me to report same back to the House. Following recommendations. House Bill 109 do pass by committee substitute. House Bill 333 do pass by committee substitute. House Bill 409 do pass by committee substitute. House Bill 443 do pass. House Bill 488 do pass. Respectfully submitted, Representative Chuck Efstration of the 104th District Chairman. Representative Alan Powell of the 32nd District Chairman of the Committee on Regulated Industries submitted the following report. Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Regulated Industries has had under consideration the following bills of the House and instructed me to report same back to the House. The following recommendations. House Bill 117 do pass. House Bill 364 do pass by committee substitute. House Bill 392 do pass. House Bill 476 do pass by committee substitute. Respectfully submitted, Representative Alan Powell of the 32nd District Chairman. That completes the reading of the reports of standing committees.
Okay, we're going on now to morning orders. Going on to morning orders. If you have signed up for a morning order, please make your way to the front of the chamber. Chair's going to ask that you limit your comments to not more than 1 minute each. And the chair recognizes for a morning order Chairman Alan Powell.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the House. If I might
Just a minute, Mr. Chairman. There are times when we have these that I must insist that there be order and respect. This is such a time.
Come on up.
If you are in the chamber, please take your seat. If you have a conversation that's a matter of life and death, life or death, take it outside. Gentlemen may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, and to those that are listening, you know, today is not near as bright a day as we have seen in past years. On September the 3rd of last year, Captain Stan Elrod of the Northeast Georgia DNR district was tragically killed by an impaired driver. And I just want to say just a few words about Stan as we commemorate his passing. Stan was one of those guys that was bigger than life. This is the same guy that y'all have seen for years who was always up here during the legislative session, he and some of the DNR Rangers that were up here with FOP and some of those. But he was one of the guys that was just absolutely the most likable person you've ever seen. He was all business when it came to DNR business. But this man had the biggest heart of anybody you've ever seen. Went to work for DNR in '93, spent 27 years, worked his way up through the ranks. And he's a guy that did not just service for the state of Georgia, but for his fellow man. Stan and some others formed an organization under DNR, and this was the outdoor, let me see if I can find this, I'm sorry. They formed Outdoor Dream Foundation, and this was an organization that the Rangers put together for sick and terminally ill children. For those children who had desires to do what normal healthy kids could do, whether it was going on a fishing trip or shooting deer or whatever it might be. And they put this together and they raised money to help these terminally ill and severely ill children. Folks, it doesn't get any better than that. Stan leaves a wife, Julie, and 2 sons, Luke and Levi, in the prime of his life. But what a great guy this was. I would like to invite every member of this House to come down and to sign a resolution honoring and commemorating Stan's life. And I want to thank you so much.
Chair is going to ask that members allow the other morning orders to be completed before you come down. Or better yet, you want to take that back to your desk. The resolution will be at Chairman Powell's desk. Chair recognizes Representative Jasmine Clark for a morning order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning. Today I rise for today's moment in Black history. I believe Black History Month is not only about those who have made history, but those who are making history. And I believe that we should give people their flowers while they can still smell them. So today I would like to highlight Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett. Dr. Corbett is a Black immunologist and also the scientific lead of the Vaccine Research Center's coronavirus team at the U.S. National Institutes of Health, or NIH. Her expertise and research in coronavirus biology and vaccine development for the past 6 years were instrumental for the crucial parts of the vaccine and treatment for coronavirus, the causative agent of COVID-19. She and her colleagues have been essential to the development of the Moderna mRNA vaccine, as well as the Eli Lilly therapeutic monoclonal antibodies that were first entered into clinical trials in the U.S. Her work and research will have immense impact on the solution to the worst global pandemic in more than 100 years. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Marin for a morning order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, buenos dias. Today, we should be celebrating Scout Day at the Capitol, and we should have over 200 scouts sitting in the galleries today. The typical day for them is to do a scavenger hunt, Capitol tours, and a Q&A with legislatures. But unfortunately, they're doing it virtual because of the COVID-19. We all know that the Scout Oath is one of the most powerful oaths that has been written. When you start with, on my honor, I will do my best to God and my country. And following with the Scout Law, which what these young men and now women live for every day, to be trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, clean, and reverent. We want also to honor in celebrating Black History Month with Mr. Harry Cooper, of Troop 92 from Kansas City, Missouri, that is believed to be the first Black Eagle Scout in the history of the Boy Scouts of America. He earned the highest rank in scouting in September 1920. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield the will. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Chair recognizes Representative Hutchinson for a morning order.
Good morning, colleagues. Today I bring to you 10-year-old Jackson. Jackson is a delightful boy who likes to play outside riding his bike, learning about sharks, watching Shark Week movies, The Meg, and drawing, coloring, reading, and sharing his arts of work with others. He also likes to read to people the books that he's reading at the time. Ladies and gentlemen, Jackson is one of the many children available for today in the state of Georgia for adoption. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the will.
Chair recognizes Chairman Blackman for a morning order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In celebration of Black History Month, we would like to honor a matriarch of our community, Miss Ada Lee. She was born in Wellston, a small railroad community that became Warner Robins, graduated from Booker T. Washington High School and the Fort Valley State University Culinary Program. She served in numerous ways over the years, is credited with forming the first Girl Scout troop for black girls in Houston County, directed the first Head Start program in Warner Robins, one of the original founders of the Houston County chapter of the NAACP, was on the Georgia Council on Human Relations, a devout member of Warner Robins CME Church, and we could go on and on. She was also the recipient of many honors and awards, including the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Award, titled Miss Senior Warner Robins, and named as one of the 50 most influential women in Middle Georgia, to mention a few. Warner Robins has also appropriately named a park in her honor. Her legacy continues through her family and the many lives she touched. I know her grandson's best, Gary, a standout on the gridiron for Georgia Tech, who after a professional career came back home and serves our city, and Warner Robins City Councilman Darren Lee, who probably sums up her greatness best. She spoke up for those who were overlooked. She was also a leader when it came to being an example of unity and working for unity in all the communities, regardless of your ethnic background, social, or economic status. Please join us in honoring the life and legacy of Miss Ada Lee. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Wade for a morning order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in recognition of a moment in Black history to recognize a Georgian, one that my dad introduced me to. And his name is Clarence Thomas. Many of you know him. He is the he is currently the Senior Associate Justice, the longest serving member of the Supreme Court with a tenure of now 29 years and 124 days as of today. He grew up in Pinpoint, Georgia, about 11 miles from Savannah in Chatham County. In 1990, President George H.W. Bush nominated Thomas to the United States Court of Appeals, which is his pathway that took him to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court experts described Thomas's jurisprudence as textualist, stressing the original meaning of the United States constitutions and statutes. He is also, along with fellow Justice Neil Gorsuch, known as an advocate of natural law. Many writers view Thomas as the court's most conservative member. He is also known for having gone over a decade without asking a question during oral arguments, and I'm certain that the Speaker and many chairmen in this House wish some of us would follow that same skill set. But my favorite quote, and I will finish with this, and I'd like you to listen if possible, given the time that we're in this day. A good argument diluted to avoid criticism is not nearly as good as the undiluted argument, because we best arrive at truth through a process of honest and vigorous debate. Arguments should not sneak around in disguise, as if dissent were somehow automatically sinister, for it is bravery that is required to secure freedom. Thank you very much, and I appreciate it. I yield the well.
Chair recognizes Chairman Mathiak and Chairman Knight for a morning order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, Chairman Knight and I are going to celebrate Black History Month with one of the pastors from Griffin, Georgia. Good morning, Cleopatra Lacey, Dr. Cleopatra Lacey from Griffin, Georgia. He and his wife are watching us via Zoom, and we wanted to honor him today and tell you a little bit about him. He gave his initial sermon in 1967 when he was ordained, and then moved forward from there. Shaw University is where he graduated from with a Bachelor of Arts degree in religion and philosophy, and moved on to Interdenominational Theological Center at Morehouse School, where he graduated in 1975. He has such an extensive resume. He has preached all over the United States, including Zambia. Today we want to honor you, Dr. Lacey, and thank you for all you've done for Griffin, Georgia.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We are now going on to the rules calendar. Going on to the rules calendar. The clerk will read the caption to House Bill 292.
House Bill 292 by Representative Williams of the 148th and others to be titled an act to amend Chapter 5 of Title 48 of the Fiscal Code of Georgia annotated relating to ad valorem taxation of property so as to remove certain training requirements for members of county boards of equalization. This bill having referred to the Committee on Ways and Means, that committee recommends that this bill do pass.
The chair recognizes Representative Noel Williams to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House, I rise today to discuss with you House Bill 292. Our Superior Court clerks have requested this bill to be presented, and it will help with the Board of Equalizations. As you know, these are the ones that hear our property tax appeals in our said counties. What this bill would do, in 2015, there was language that was added requiring an additional 20 hours of education for these members. And already these members, once they are appointed on these boards, they have a 40-hour task, and then each year they have 8 hours of continuing education. This bill would simply strike that 20 hours away, because as you know, a lot of these boards are on different committees all over their communities, and we just think this is too much time for them. And this was asked for us, came out of Ways and Means, and the Superior Court clerks have all over the state have been requesting this information, or this bill. Thank you.
You do have a question if you yield.
Yes, sir, I'll yield.
Chair recognizes Representative Hughley to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
So what would these board members be left with in terms of their training requirement once we take this away?
Well, thank you for asking that, Representative. Once they're appointed to this committee, then they have a 40-hour class that they must complete. After that 40-hour class, each year they have an additional 8 hours. And what this bill was saying was after the 3 years, if they go for their second appointment by the grand jury, then they would have an additional 20 hours. And that's why they're saying, this is just too much for these members, and it's just it's a burden for them.
No further questions.
Thank you. Please vote favorably on this House Bill 292. Thank you.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of House Bill 292. The ayes are 165, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 455.
House Bill 455 by Representative Barr, the 103rd, and others, to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia and Teddy relating to elementary and secondary education so as to revise a provision relating to student transportation. This bill having referred to the Committee on Education, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Timothy Barr to present the bill.
Good morning, colleagues. I have a great bill here for your consideration this morning. House Bill 455. This bill is an opt-in for local boards of education to allow alternate transportation of school children. Currently, we are the only state in the nation that requires by law that our children be transported by yellow school bus. The State Board of Education would provide safety standards, and then the locals would also be able to add any safety standards that they felt necessary. This bill is not meant to replace the yellow school bus by any means, but merely a tool in the toolbox of our local boards to be able to do what best fits their needs. Again, it's not a mandate, and I'll stand for any questions.
You do have a question if you care to yield.
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes Representative Jasmine Clark up in the gallery to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
So does this bill allow for local school boards to allow transportation in sedans and SUVs and things like that?
Yes, ma'am. This is a great question. What we have in this bill is there is a maximum number of children that can be transported in a vehicle, but it's completely left up to the locals to determine their own standards after the state sets the minimum standards.
Okay, thank you.
Have no further questions.
Thank you, sir. I yield the well. Please vote in favor of this. Your local school boards are going to love this.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of House Bill 455 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of House Bill 455. The ayes are 165, the nays are 1. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 306.
House Bill 306 by Representative Gunner of the 8th and others, to be entitled an act to amend Part 1 of Article 7 of Chapter 2 of Title 14 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to meetings, so as to provide that a corporation may hold annual shareholders meetings and special shareholders meetings by means of remote communication. This bill having referred to the Committee on Banks and Banking, that committee recommends that this bill do pass.
Chair recognizes Representative Gunter to present the bill. Wait, before you get into the bill, Representative, Chair has a few questions.
Yes, sir.
I came into your courtroom many, many times over the years, didn't I?
You did, sir.
Was I always respectful?
You were.
Did I pay you proper deference as a judge?
Yes, sir, you did. You called me Your Honor numerous times.
Well, guess what? You're not a judge anymore.
That's right. And I'm in your court.
So, excellent point. Gentlemen may proceed.
Thank you. All right, House Bill 306 is amending the Georgia Business Corporation Code. Currently in that code, it does not expressly permit virtual or remote communication meetings for shareholders for corporations. Corporations are required to have shareholder meetings annually, and when the COVID hit, the governor's emergency order set out a procedure, and this pretty well follows that. So it updates our code, it modernizes it, and allows for a fully virtual shareholder meeting or a partial, or what we call a hybrid, where it's in person and remote. So I'll yield for any questions.
Looks like you do have a question. Do you yield?
I yield.
When we started talking about judges and courts, he got nervous, so the chair recognizes Representative Ridley to your right.
Oh, Lord.
Does the gentleman yield?
I yield.
I just got one question. Do you think your predecessor would vote yes or no on this bill?
I think it would be red.
I believe so, too. Good bill, thank you.
I think we need to tell the people of the 8th House District this is a first in many, many, many years that they've had a member presenting a bill to this House. Oh, well, you have no further questions.
Thank you. I appreciate your favorable consideration.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered on House Bill 306? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. for old time's sake. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of House Bill 306. The ayes are 169, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Resolution 142.
House Resolution 142 by Representative Green of the 151st and others, a resolution authorizing the lease of certain state-owned property located in Baldwin County. This bill having been referred to the Committee on State Properties, that committee recommends this resolution be adopted.
Chair recognizes Chairman Gerald Green to present the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members of the House, I bring for your consideration today House Resolution 142. For those that are new, this is an annual resolution from our State Properties Commission and then from the State Properties Committee. And the State Properties Committee looks at all the conveyances, and our committee then contacts each representative that would be affected by this resolution. Mr. Speaker, this was the first time in a long, long time we have had only 3 conveyances come out of the House committee. And House members, we will send this over to the Senate for their consideration and additions. And if any House member failed to get in this House resolution at this time, they have a chance in the Senate, maybe. At any time, your Committee on State Properties stands ready to assist you on these matters of conveyances. And I'd ask for your favorable support for House Resolution 142 with a yes vote. Mr. Speaker, if there are no questions, I yield the will.
You have no questions. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All those in favor of the adoption of the resolution will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. On adjournment. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the adoption of House Resolution 142, the ayes are 172, the nays are 0. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Clerk will read the caption, House Resolution 143.
House Resolution 143 by Representative Green and the 151st and others, a resolution authorizing the grant of non-exclusive easements for the construction, installation, operation, and maintenance of facilities, utilities, roads, and ingresses and egresses in, on, over, and under, upon, or across, or through property owned by the state of Georgia. This bill has been referred to the Committee on State Properties. That committee recommends that this resolution be adopted by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes the chair of the committee, Chairman Green, to present the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I bring you the substitute House Resolution 143. The same thing is in regard to our easements from the state properties, and you will see listed in your bill there those particular easements that are under consideration. I would ask for your favorable support for House Resolution 143 by substitute. Mr. Speaker, if there's no questions, I yield the will.
There are no questions. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All those in favor of the adoption of the resolution will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the adoption of House Resolution 143. The ayes are 170, the nays are 0. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 179.
House Bill 179 by Representative Camp of the 131st and others, to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 4286, the official code of Georgia annotated, relating to special license plates promoting or supporting certain worthy agencies, funds, or nonprofit corporations. This bill having referred to the Committee on Motor Vehicles, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Who is Representative Camp? Oh, you're Representative Camp. You must have just got here. And you already got a bill. Wow. That's amazing and good. Chair recognizes Representative Beth Camp to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is a substitute for House Bill 179, and it's near and dear to my heart for a number of reasons. First off, it recognizes a new tag for breast cancer awareness. All of us have been touched. Most of us have lost a loved one, unfortunately, to breast cancer. So I think it's important for all of us to make sure that funding exists for that. Also, the Support Our Troops tags. My father and father-in-law are both veterans. And lastly, most of us have attended colleges or universities, and the proceeds from those card tags actually go to foundations within those organizations to help fund further education for those current students. So at this time, okay.
Do you yield for questions?
Yes, sir, I do yield for questions. Thank you.
Well, you must not have done a very good job of explaining it. Chair recognizes Representative Gamble for a question. He's in 341.
Okay.
He'll be on the screen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentlelady yield?
Yes, I yield.
Is this your first bill?
Yes, it is.
Well, excellent, and congratulations on such a great bill, because I know that the Support Our Troops license plate is a part of this. And is it not true that since 2013, Support Our Troops has attributed to close to $4 million in contributions that have ended up in Georgia installations in our state?
Yes, Representative Gamble, that is correct. The information I've received deems the information you're giving to be correct.
Well, I thank you for this bill and enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you.
Do you have other questions? You continue to yield.
Yes, sir, I yield.
Chair recognizes Chairman Fleming to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the lady in the well, I support your bill. I like it. But as I look through it, even if we pass this bill and the Senate does, there is no date of enactment in the bill.
Oh, that's a wonderful catch.
That's kind of important. Maybe you should ask somebody about that.
Well, that would, okay.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, sir, I certainly will. Thank you very much.
You want to see if somebody else has a catch they want
Signature
to
of the
make?
governor. Yes, I just had a stroke of inspiration. I do believe the signature of the governor would be the date of enactment.
That was a trick question, I guess. Chair recognizes Chairman Martin to your left for a question.
Would the lady yield?
Yes, sir.
I just wonder, you're new to the body, isn't that true?
Yes, sir, that is true.
I just wondered, when they asked you to carry this bill, were you apprised that it's normally House tradition for the author of the bill to match the donation for the first 1,000 tags purchased? Were you familiar with that tradition?
No, sir, I am not familiar with that tradition, but we can certainly pass around a plate or a hat.
Chairman Fleming and
to
I,
fulfill that obligation.
if I might waive the rule, Chairman Fleming and I would be the first people to donate to you on that. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Do you continue to yield?
Yes, sir, I continue to yield.
Ooh. Well, let's see.
Leave the
Chair recognizes your colleague in the gallery, Chairman Burchett, to your right for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentlelady yield?
I do yield.
Thank you for bringing this bill. I think this is a very important bill. And I wondered if the lady would consider grabbing us a water and a Coke on your way back up to the gallery.
Chairman Burchett, if that is the conclusion of your question, then yes, I will agree to those terms.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Representative McCain.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, I wish to yield the well.
Good job. Lady has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to withdrawing the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is withdrawn. Is there any objection to adopting the substitute offered by the Committee on Rules? The chair hears none. The Rules Committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. What purpose does Representative Bazemore rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is it not true that my
Is this
bill...
a parliamentary inquiry?
I'm sorry, parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that House Bill 50, that is the all cancer license plate bill, was my bill, and I thank the kind lady for bringing it forward.
If the lady so states. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of House Bill 179. The ayes are 165, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to a group of privilege resolutions. Oh, I'm sorry, we got one more bill. How did I forget that one? Yesterday, House Bill 286 was postponed to the next legislative day. It is called at this time. The clerk will read the caption to House Bill 286.
House Bill 286 by Representative Gaines, the 117th, and others to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 8 of Title 36, the official code of Georgia annotated, relating to county police, so as to restrict the ability of county governing authorities to reduce funding for county police departments. This bill item referred to the Committee on Governmental Affairs. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Gaines to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning I bring House Bill 286 before the body. We've seen in our state and in parts of our nation calls to defund the police and slash police budgets. And I believe, and I hope this body will agree, that doing so would put our most vulnerable at risk. Our state believes in and has championed criminal justice reform, but defunding the police is a dangerous idea that will harm those who most need protection and put victims at risk. Last year, Minneapolis slashed funding for its police department, and we've already seen them backtracking in recent days. But that won't make up for the crimes committed, the lives lost, and the damage done to that community. In Athens and Atlanta, we've seen efforts to defund the police. Our bill will ensure that that never happens in our state and will protect Georgia families. This legislation sends a strong message that we support our law enforcement officers and that we will never defund the police here in Georgia. I'll briefly walk through the specifics of the bill. Essentially, it prohibits cities and counties from cutting more than 5% of their police budgets. We've worked into the bill reasonable needs for reducing police spending, like a loss of revenue greater than 5%, the need for one-time large capital projects, and other necessary exceptions. We've worked with city and county leaders across the state and law enforcement officers, and I've been really pleased by the support of local leaders in Georgia who back this bill. That's because we believe our law enforcement needs more funding to increase the pay of our police, to increase training for those who, on the front lines. When a victim calls 911, we need quick response times. Defunding the police is a radical idea that will slow response times for victims and put our families and communities at risk. I'm proud this bill has the support of the Police Benevolent Association, and I'm also proud that in my conversation with folks across this state, this isn't a partisan issue. I've received calls from Republicans, Democrats, people across the political spectrum in support of this measure, and local leaders in support of this measure, again, across the political spectrum in support of this bill. We cannot afford to defund the police, and I believe this bill today will send a very strong message that we won't allow that to happen here in Georgia. Mr. Speaker, I'd be happy to answer a few questions if there are any.
You have some questions? Do you yield?
I do.
Chair recognizes Chairman Collins to your left for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
Is it not true that one of the main goals of local government, as far as public safety goes, is to protect our local residents, those local people in those governments? Is that correct?
Absolutely. I believe it's the most essential function of local government.
And is it further not true, we've heard a lot of discussion in the committee, that this bill no way restricts local governments from allocating money for mental health issues and making sure that they're taking care of the mentally deprived in their community? Is that correct?
Absolutely. I think both you and I would agree we should increase funding for mental health initiatives across our state, and the General Assembly has done that in recent years.
Okay. I think this is a great bill. We appreciate you bringing it to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do you further yield?
I will for a couple more.
Chair recognizes Chairman Hogan up in the gallery for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
I will.
Did not the Brunswick News run an editorial in support of your bill?
I believe they did.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do you further yield?
I'll yield for two more.
Chair recognizes Representative Dempsey, or Chairman Dempsey, to your right for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
I will.
As a former Rome City Commissioner, challenged with making sure that city was strong and safe, is it not true, as has already been stated, that safety is one of the most important concerns of our police forces?
Absolutely. And I think, again, that's the most important function of our local government, is to keep our communities safe. And I think this measure will be a significant step towards achieving that.
Does the gentleman further yield?
I will.
Not only ensuring safety, but one of the greatest challenges that our local police forces face is recruiting and retention of officers. And that stability in pay will help them.
Absolutely. Like you say, I think we need to increase the pay of our law enforcement officers, increase funding for training, and you know, taking money away from law enforcement is not the answer.
Thank you for this measure.
Thank you.
Do you further yield for a couple of questions?
I'll yield for one more.
Chair recognizes Chairman Hitchens. Do you right for a question?
I do.
Is it not true that I have pretty extensive knowledge in law enforcement matters, pay, recruitment, professionalism, and that the state of Georgia, through the years, has spent significant amount of monies on our state law enforcement agencies to promote professionalism, education, and just good stewardship of the law enforcement profession throughout the state?
Absolutely. And thank you for your service.
Well, will you further yield?
I will.
Isn't it true that I also know that in law enforcement, about 85 to 90% of all budgets are in personal services or salaries, and about 5 to 10% more are in vehicles? So if that's the case, you take 5% away, you've already spent 90 to 95%. You don't have any money left for anything else. Somebody's got to go.
That's right.
Will you further yield?
I will.
And in taking those first two questions under consideration, wouldn't you say that it's very likely that if you take 5% away from any law enforcement agency, that you're going to have a reduction in force, you're going to have morale problems, and you're going to do away with some professionalism and effectiveness?
Absolutely.
It's a great bill, and I certainly am going to support it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yield
I
for
yield
one
the will.
more.
I'll yield for one more.
Chair recognizes the Minority Leader of the House, Leader Beverly, for a question. To your left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
I will.
Isn't it true that the Constitution of the state of Georgia trumps bills that we would pass in the General Assembly?
I believe that to be true.
Thank you.
Yes,
No further
sir.
question.
And I will mention there was question in the committee about the home rule issue, and that may be to what you're referring, but home rule only restricts the General Assembly's ability to pass local bills. This legislation applies statewide, and so I believe this is a good measure that's going to help keep our community safe. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll yield the will.
Gentleman has yielded the well. We have a number of members that have signed up to speak on the measure. The debate will be limited to 30 minutes per each side to be allocated between the speakers as they see fit. Then we have a minority report and the chairman's time. Chair recognizes Representative Wynn to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. His name was Anthony Hill. He was a 26-year-old veteran who served in Afghanistan. He was black, naked, unarmed, and suffering from mental health when he was shot and killed by law enforcement. His apartment manager, who called the police, was concerned for his safety, and the responding officer who shot and killed him was actually convicted and sentenced to 12 years. I cannot speak to the intent of the officer, but I can speak about the fact that law enforcement's job is not to handle mental health, and they are simply not equipped to do it. And as with this case, it is not a single isolated case. Between 5 and 15% of calls placed to law enforcement are families who are calling for mental health support for their loved ones. And in these cases, law enforcement officers are often not able to respond adequately. People with untreated mental health issues are 16 times more likely to be killed by law enforcement. 16 times. This, along with the killings of Rayshard Brooks, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and other incidences of police brutality, has prompted a national dialogue on the role of law enforcement in our communities. I think every member in this body would agree that all Georgians want to live in safe communities. But we also recognize the presence of law enforcement doesn't make all communities safer. It is a truth that we do not like to admit, but we have the statistics and the stories to show it. If you are black or brown, whether armed or unarmed, you are more likely to be killed by law enforcement than your white counterpart. The calls for reimagining public safety are exactly about this. How do we build communities where all members are protected by law enforcement? And what should the role of law enforcement be in our community? The efforts to transfer funding from police departments is about addressing the root causes that we so desperately need to address. It is mental health issues, homelessness, addiction, domestic violence, poverty, and systemic racism. And at the heart of this, diverting funds to social workers, healthcare, housing, education, or creating new programming is aimed at reducing incarceration. Don't we as a body want to reduce incarceration? That's why we created accountability courts and pre-arrest diversion programs, because we know incarceration doesn't lead to safer communities, but it leads to a cycle that is both financially costly and harmful to our state and to our communities. Our state of Georgia spends $20,000 a year to incarcerate one individual, including those who are convicted for nonviolent crimes. And just as we are beginning to address the systemic flaws in policing, this bill would shut down the necessary discourse that elected officials are having with members of their communities. We did see proposals to transfer funding from police departments to other areas of needs, and they did not pass, either in Athens, Clarke County, or City of Atlanta. But fundamental in this is the public process by which local elected officials, whom are duly elected by their constituents, have the duty and responsibility to engage with their communities to decide what is best for their cities and for their counties. This is gross overreach by our state to usurp the wills of counties and municipalities and the constituents who elected their local elected officials. We do need the flexibility to have these conversations. And yes, we do need local control. That is what we use to decide what is best for our communities. And sometimes we may not like the outcome of that, but that is also why we have local elections. It's called a democracy. So as we collectively grapple with the role of law enforcement in our communities, my own city, the City of Atlanta, is proposing a Department of Public Safety and Wellness. It would create a division focused on non-emergency responses, including mental health crises. And it would establish a non-emergency response number for residents. This department would also reduce the workload for City of Atlanta Police Department and allow professionals who are actually equipped with the right training to respond to things like mental health and addiction. And this is exactly what we mean by reimagining the police. It means creating communities that are safe for everybody and not just for some of us. It means addressing root causes to reduce crime and to become less reliant on law enforcement. It means if you are black or brown, if you are poor or facing homelessness, if you are suffering from mental health addiction or mental health issues, you are not going to be killed by law enforcement or get shuffled into an incarceration system that does not rehabilitate or offer restorative justice. That's why I am voting against House Bill 286 today and ask members to do the same. I yield the well.
Chair recognizes Representative Holcomb to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me begin by saying that the context in which this bill has been presented has to do with the very important national discussion that we have had over issues of race and justice in the police. I've done a lot of reflecting over that over the last year, and I think what's really important is that we listen to the voices who have cried out about the injustices and that we work to address that. And I think that that's really important. But my problem with this bill is, to be really candid, it's really horribly written. It's bad policy, and there's so much that is just awful about it. So let me just walk you through it. If you have the bill, there's two sections, and one of them has to do, section 1 has to do with counties and their police departments. Section 2 has to do with municipalities. The language basically maps each other. So where does it fail? It fails right off the bat. If you go to line 17, it talks about actual or anticipated revenues, but it does not define revenues. At the local government, you have general fund revenues, which can be property taxes, sales taxes, your basic annual appropriations and revenues. It doesn't take into account one-time appropriations. You can have intergovernmental transfers, you can have SPLOST monies, you can have special purpose monies, so it does a very poor job of defining revenues. And why is that important? Because the revenues are going to set the baseline by which we're going to hold governments accountable going forward. That's a huge mistake and a huge error. I did some surveys over the last few nights in terms of our local governments and what they're spending, and what's interesting is there is no massive decline in funding for public safety or police that's happening. So that, of course, raises the question, why do we need this? In fact, I even looked at Athens-Oconee County, no decline. It's not happening. So if it's not happening, why do we need this policy? But my concern comes from thinking through, as we are charged to do, the second and third order effects of if we have economic challenges and you have declines in revenues, we are going to force our local governments to make decisions that may be very damaging and detrimental across the board. So let's continue to work through. Besides this initial revenue issue, another big problem that it has is that it would allow our local governments to reduce police spending up to 4.99% per year. But then if you go down, there is a look-back period that holds the maximum amount that can be declined is 5% over a 10-year period. This does not require complicated math skills to know that if you decline by 4.99%, 3%, 2.5% every year for 10 years, you will be out of compliance with having reduced the budget by 5% over 10 years. So there is a massive internal inconsistency here, and we're setting our local governments up for potential failure with that, and that is a big concern and a big problem. So with that, the bill, I think, notes that there may be challenges with home rule and litigation. Among other things, local governments may be exploring how to be innovative to reduce incidents of crime, to reduce the need for public expenditures across the board. And if they make such judgments, they can be subject to litigation. This is noted in section 1 in lines 45 through 48. And there's a couple things about that that I think are worth mentioning. If there's litigation, then that's going to be fewer dollars to pay for police services, among other things. So you're going to have fewer resources. And there is an issue with litigation earlier in the bill that I want to highlight, and that's in lines 23 to 28, because this even notes that you can have one-time legal obligation, which I would read that as a settlement, but it doesn't talk about legal fees. There aren't too many cases that I know of that are wrapped up very quickly. So you can have an elevation in revenues over time And that's not reflected here. Again, it is a failure of how you account for revenues in this bill, and there are consequences to that. Another issue with the litigation is it doesn't say what is the enforcement mechanism. So if a local community fails to do this, either on an annual basis or over 10 years, what is the enforcement mechanism? What is the outcome? What is ultimately going to happen? There's nothing. It's just window dressing. So there's a lot here that really needs to be fixed and that needs to be improved. And in terms of just efficiency of government, which we should all care about, I think that this prevents innovation and cost-saving measures, and 5% is not a huge delta. That is something that happens with regularity at the local level. You can have swings in that range, and we're capping it at that. So interestingly, this could also have the unintended consequence of if a local government has unforeseen increases in revenues, they could be hesitant to spend more dollars on police because that will set a new baseline going forward by which all of their subsequent appropriations will be judged and kind of modified. So practically speaking, I'll also tell you, having done a little bit of a survey of county and municipal governments, they're all over the map in terms of what they put out there. Some are pretty good and have historical documents over 10 years. Some have a single year that they put forward in terms of the monies that are being spent. I would certainly support efforts at more transparency of showing how much are you spending on these issues, how much are you decreasing them over time to inform the electorate of are we moving up or down. I think that those could be some proposals that we could have a conversation about. But overall, as you can tell, my concerns with this are that the unintended consequences are legitimate and significant, and it doesn't take a lot of brainstorming to envision how this can take place. It really removes the ability of local decision makers to have flexibility for all kinds of situations that they're likely going to see, retirements, etc. And for some parts of our state, who here thinks that they're going to have the exact same needs in terms of service requirements 10 years from now? We have parts of the state that have declining populations, and what we're saying is you still have to budget at 5% of where you were 10 years ago. That's insane. It's ridiculous. So finally, I'll close with this because I know that there are other people that want to speak on it. You may recall that not too long ago, August of 2019, in fact, Governor Kemp put forward a statement that said that we were going to cut the budget by 4% mid-year. That gets into also this issue of anticipated and actual revenues. That's not clearly defined. Is anticipated only at the beginning, or can you anticipate changes along the way? It's unclear. But then what did he say for fiscal year 2021, which is what we're in now? We were going to cut at what level? 6%. This says the max that you can do is 5%. So as the state, we're setting a level that we don't even uphold on our own, which I think is just absurd. So I'm happy to answer questions, but I know that there are others that want to speak, so I'll yield the well, and if you want to talk, come see me. Thanks.
Chair recognizes Representative Kennard to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise in opposition to HB 286. The largest mental health service provider in our state is Georgia State Prisons, the largest by far. This is what happens when mental illness and access to treatment is not prioritized. Georgia remains at the bottom in the U.S. in terms of mental health access. And when we fail to address this issue on the front end with adequate mental health access, we are forced to deal with it on the back end with law enforcement and corrections. In effect, Georgia criminalizes mental illness. The transitional program of which I am founder and CEO, we work daily in the middle of this space. We serve the homeless, and a typical client for us has a mental health diagnosis, a second diagnosis of addiction, and a felony background. These three things are many times connected. According to NAMI, the National Alliance of Mental Illness, most folks who abuse the substances of drugs and alcohol have an underlying mental health condition that is not being treated. So mental illness, addiction, homelessness, incarceration are too often directly related. Here's the way it happens every day in Georgia. One of our citizens experiences a mental health crisis, a 911 call is made, and the police respond. And God bless our police departments. I have many friends and families who are in law enforcement, but they are not mental health professionals. These situations are beyond the ambit of their expertise. It is unfair to everyone engaged. And when the situation escalates, as it often does, an arrest happens, or sometimes much worse, too many times lethal force. Another dynamic that compounds this problem in our state is that we have so few crisis stabilization unit beds. Jails are used as default facilities. The local community service board in Gwinnett County, where I serve, is Viewpoint Health, and they are wonderful. They do wonderful and great work, but their safety net is not large enough. Viewpoint Health serves Gwinnett County, Rockdale, Newton, and portions of DeKalb, so pushing 1.5 million people. How many crisis beds do we have? 23, a paltry 23, which doesn't come close to addressing the needs. And historically, when these CSU beds fill up, the folks who are in custody of the police as a result of the 911 call, who are not criminals, they're merely sick, they end up being locked up. The person in crisis effectively gets caged and often put into isolation, which is the last thing a person in crisis needs. It only exacerbates the crisis. My county and the cities I serve are grappling with this issue of mental illness, looking for better and appropriate options to prevent unnecessary incarceration. The program where I serve, we have 70 bed spaces, and we stay maxed out with a waiting list. Many of our clients and much of the waiting list is comprised of referrals from our accountability court systems. I'm a huge fan of the accountability court system. They're very effective, but I need to point out that that's still a reactive measure and not a proactive one. We work with mental health court, drug court, veterans court, DUI court, and for most of these clients, mental health is in the mix. But it's only after this person has been arrested, incarcerated, while behind bars that there is a psychiatric evaluation conducted and treatment started. And then we determine this person doesn't need jail. They would be better served by therapy and programming. If programs like ours had more funding, we could expand our capacity. Currently, we turn more people away than we accept. HB 286 would handcuff, pun intended, us to the law enforcement option. Local governments need the flexibility to allocate our tax dollars to address the issues with our own customized local strategies. When a crime is being committed, we should send our men and women in blue. When it's mental health, we should send the appropriate and qualified professionals. Please vote no to HB 286. Mr. Speaker, in deference to time, I yield the will.
The gentleman has yielded the will. Chair recognizes Representative Saines to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A wise seatmate of mine said, "Be brief. If you go to the well, you're more apt to be listened to." So I will try to do so, because there is nothing in this bill that is complex. There is nothing more personal to a Georgia citizen when they need to call 911. When there's a mother in a domestic violence situation fearing for her life, or the countless other calls for service our local law enforcement respond to, I have seen firsthand as a deputy sheriff the crucialness of a quick and speedy response. The opposition to this bill will try to rationalize the idea that it is not a pertinent subject for this body, that there is better use of our time and energy, and on this note, I agree. Restricting defunding police is not a visionary policy. This bill does not dictate how Georgia communities can structure their departments or what equipment they feel necessary for their officers to have, what mental health services that they should provide, what ways they can serve their citizens. What this bill does is set a minimum a minimum standard of what Georgia citizens know, what standard the Georgia citizens know they are entitled to, and the safety that they should expect. This bill is an unfortunate necessity made relevant to us by the willingness of some of our local governments to show their willingness to abdicate their obligations to our citizens. To preserve public order and to protect life and property is of core expectation. My dear colleagues, we ask our local officers to face innumerable unknowns. The funding for their positions should not be one of them, and those they are served deserve better. A member of this body said it best in committee, when a Georgia citizen dials for help, they deserve an answer. Let's be clear, this bill is part of answering that. Thank you. I yield the well.
Chair recognizes Chairman Alan Powell to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House. I don't like to come down here and speak on some of these bills from time to time unless I really think I've got something I want to point out. But the base obligations of government, and that's the duties of government, first and foremost, is public protection, to ensure a civil society and a safe society. You know, in this world we live in, not everybody out there subscribes to their Second Amendment rights the way some do. And it's the most vulnerable people that need to have public safety and a good, strong public safety system. You know, I listened to this and I thought to myself when this bill was put in, I said, what's the necessity to this bill? Is it that bad? But it's not necessarily that bad, but it is as much as an answer to the politicalization of an issue that has been made in the last year. Defund police. Defund law enforcement. You know, you can defund a lot of parts of government and a lot of funding in government, but there's one place that you don't need to defund, and that's the public safety arena. The arena that protects people's lives, because that's what really matters. I've listened to some of the speakers intently that were up here a while ago, and you know, I listened about mental health. I listened about minorities who are killed under justifiable. I don't know if they are or they're not, and I'm sure that there's some law enforcement officers that have probably done some things that were overreaching and things like that, but I always remind people, until you've walked in their shoes. And when you see someone who, if you see a suspect who has a weapon and you're an officer, you don't know what the suspect's going to do with that weapon. You don't. If that officer is called to duty and a suspect, after interrogation, takes a weapon from that officer's belt and tries to fire it at him, whether it's a taser or a weapon, then that's a dangerous situation. And these are things that we need to be on guard. We don't need to be prejudicial until something's been proven about these officers, because these are some folks that are doing a job that nobody else wants to do, quite frankly. But the bottom line is they have a base duty, and that's to enforce the law and to protect the citizens, to protect and serve that we continue to hear. But then I heard the discussion, not just about, the treatment of minorities, but I heard about the mental health issue. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, and I've heard these discussions about that, but yeah, you need more folks dealing with mental health. I can assure you, and I'm telling the members here something that they're not, probably will not disagree with me, but we're going through one of the toughest times on mental health, and I call it the COVID anger stage, that you can't please anybody. People's anxieties are up, but this isn't anything new, ladies and gentlemen. law enforcement will tell you that the most dangerous call that they get is on a domestic violence call or a domestic call of any sort. Do they need more? Do we need more? Do we need to do away with police officers and hire more sociologists? Yeah, we probably do. But I'll tell you that those police officers, for the biggest role in the new training and the extensive training they're going through, they're being trained in mediation results and how to deal with different folks. But at the end of the day, say what they want to, there will always be need for more and not less money that goes to public safety. I remember a few years ago when I sat in the same chair that Chairman Collins sits in over at Public Safety. And I was absolutely aghast when a memo came by me that was put out by Atlanta PD to a memo to the merchants in the Buckhead area and the such, that if you have shoplifting appearing in your store, then don't call us, call private security. And I thought to myself, what kind of message does that send? And then we continue to see more and more of a deterioration and more outwardly criminal activity. Even if you would call street racing or doing donuts and all of that, you know, we've gone for several years trying to figure out and being held hostage or being asked by the cities, help us, pass more laws dealing with the street racing or cutting drags and all that. And I think to myself, well, why don't you just get your law enforcement to do what they always do? They need to block off the streets. They need to catch them. They need to fine them. They need to confiscate the vehicles. But yet there's always another reason of why they can't. Well, yes, they can. Enforce the law. But that's not what this is about. This is about defunding. This is a politicalized issue. And it's politicalized to play to the base of one of the political parties. But at the end of the day, public safety is out there for both political parties, and it should serve both equally. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would certainly encourage you to vote yes on this legislation. Do I think it really makes a lot of difference? I don't think you'll ever hear a whole lot about it because very seldom do you ever see the public safety arena to be cut, except in some of the most extreme cases of some of the folks who are continuing to politicalize. But I would encourage you to vote yes on this piece of legislation.
Chair recognizes Chairman Knight to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't want to get up and support this bill, but I want to echo what Chairman Powell said. This bill is about politics. And some of the comments that have been made on this floor today in regards to why you shouldn't vote for this bill, I just can't sit here and not respond. Chairman Powell, you're exactly right. One of the primary responsibility of government, especially our local governments, is what? Is public safety. As referred to the comments about the definitions of revenues, and this bill lacks that, and it just doesn't, cut the right language in here. I think that's incorrect. A little history or a little perspective about what local governments do in their funding. We have what's called a general fund, and one gentleman mentioned that. That general fund is where tax revenues or taxes are levied by our local government officials, and they're appropriated for the purpose of the public. And one of those public issues is public safety. And public safety should be available to anyone. Whether there's a fire at your house or your neighbor's house, you are the recipient of that public safety if you need it or if you don't need it. And the same thing goes for law enforcement, for our police departments. God help you, and I hope that none of us ever have to experience something and call and have the police called at our house because there's somebody breaking in or there's a crime being committed. But quite frankly, if you do, that's a responsibility of the local government to do it. And then to say that the revenues are out there and the funds and all these different funds, well, all the different funds are restricted. And if you're talking about the enterprise funds, those are a fee-for-service fund, okay? And they're to be used for those purposes. And when it comes to interfund transfers, that's not revenue. That's a balance sheet item. One fund owes another fund. It's not revenue. That's a false statement. And as far as the transparency issue of the budgets, every local city and county government has meetings, commission and committee meetings, and everybody in the public is welcome to show up, and there's a budgetary process, and you are welcome as the public to go up there, and if you've got a question about what is being spent in the budget, you get to go up there and do it. On top of that, guess what? Every local government in the state of Georgia is required to file an audit. Or guess what? You may not be subject. If you do and you violate that, you may not get funded or available to receive state or federal funds. So it's just complete nonsense, some of the excuses that we've heard. I used to do auditing. Haven't done it in a long time. City audit, municipal audit. And I happened at that time, at night, I would go out and ride with the police of that little city. And I watched them, and I actually was there, and I don't know how much drugs they took off of the highways and the streets. And for people to get up here and say that this is a mental illness issue, while at the same time mentioning that it's about drugs, there's an addiction issue that's causing people to get here. Well, go ahead and make sure that we're already stretched thin of the war on drugs, and our police are the primary force fighting the war on drugs to keep the drugs out of the hands of the people you pretend to protect. Let's just let more drugs on the street. Hypocritical. Drugs kill people. It destroys lives, but yet this political ploy about the police being the enemy when they're in fact the ones that are out there defending and on the front line with the war on drugs, trying to keep drugs out of our state, out of our schools, out of our cities, our communities, off our streets. And I'm going to make one last comment. We look around and it's politics today, and we talk about drugs and addictions. How many of you would vote to legalize drugs? How many of you from your districts and these cities and these counties that want to go down this route of defunding the police have refused to prosecute drug crimes? But then on the other hand, you're sitting here propping yourself up politically on the fact that you're trying to get people off of drugs. And that's the reason for all of the mental illness and all of the issues that face us. It's gut check time. Quit the politics. Get back down to where we're helping people and we're going to the root cause no matter what color you are. There's people who die on the streets every day and die of overdoses, and it doesn't make a difference if they're black, white, brown, yellow. It really doesn't. And to come up here and do this, it's intellectually dishonest, and it does a disservice to the people of the state, to the people we purportedly serve in our districts, and most of all, our friends and our families. Mr. Speaker, I support this bill, and I hope that everyone will too.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. We're now going on to the minority report and the chair's time. 20 minutes each total for each of the presentations. 20 minutes for the minority report and 20 minutes for the chair's time, to be allocated as the speakers see fit. Chair recognizes for the minority report Representative Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill does absolutely nothing to increase or protect public safety. All it does is dictate to local governments what they have to spend on law enforcement, regardless of what they can afford, regardless of how the priorities change within that community. And it's really interesting because we have spent so much time micromanaging local governments this session. We spend more time on that than we do on state business. Last week we were told local governments can't decide what kind of fences they want in their neighborhood. This week we're told they can't decide how to work out their budget and what the priorities should be in their budget. In committee, it was said that this bill was to defeat calls to defund the police, which is really just black and brown communities saying that over-policing leads to more police killings and police brutality in our communities. And there are better ways for the money to be spent, and let us figure that out in our communities. Republicans know that these issues are connected, and that's the reason why you didn't want to talk about this bill yesterday, because it was the 1-year anniversary of Ahmaud Arbery being killed. So you know that this stuff is connected. But let's talk about the real animus for these bills, because Georgia's not the only state that's seeing one of these bills. These bills are being filed across the country by Republicans. And I think that this is a weird PR campaign by Republicans to absolve themselves of the fact that domestic terrorists from their party went up to the Capitol on January 6th and killed and maimed police officers. Defund the police has never killed any police officers. Defund the police has never maimed any police officers. So Republicans, you can continue to run these weird PR campaigns if you want to. Democrats will continue to press for justice and to make sure that we don't see any more of the following: Eric Gardner's, Michael Brown, Laquan McDonald, Tamir Rice, Walter Scott, Samuel DuBose, Freddie Gray, Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Rashard Brooks, Jamarian Robinson, Shalee Tilson, Tanisha Anderson, Alexia Christian, Maya Hall, Nick Thomas, and many more. I'll yield the next couple of minutes to Representative Anulewicz.
Chair recognizes Representative Anulewicz for a portion of the minority report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Y'all know that I have always believed that municipal and county governments exemplify the very best of what a representative democracy like ours has to offer. A community within a city or a county, neighborhoods that make up the essence of what we think of when we think of communities of interest. They elect the person who they feel will best represent their voice on their city council, their city commission, or their county commission. It is critically important that we do not forget that these local elected officials represent their communities in a way that, candidly, we don't. And that the constituencies they represent are often just one segment of our House districts that often span multiple counties and cities. I realized this when I made the transition from the Smyrna City Council to this chamber. All of a sudden, I could shop at the supermarket up the road from my house without being stopped every 3 minutes to talk about a zoning issue or hear about someone's neighbor's noisy dog. Our local governments ensure that the most fundamental needs of our communities are met. It's local governments who we ultimately look to make sure that when we turn on the tap, the water that comes out is safe, and that when we flush the toilet, that wastewater goes where it is supposed to go. Local governments ensure that the roads are paved, they ensure that we have parks, that we have recreation, and they ensure that when we are in peril, when we pick up our phones and we dial 911, someone comes to help us. When we are here in Atlanta, and make no mistake, the work we do here in this chamber is critically important to our communities. Our local government representatives are on the ground back at home. They are making the decisions to ensure that our hometowns are running in a way that serve the best interest of the people who elected them. And they, not us, they are the best fiduciary stewards for their communities, whether it's their budgets for public works, sanitation, parks and recreation, or public safety. And here's the thing, these local officials, even the ones whose views might not align with your politics, they all want to live in safe communities. They all want to live in safe communities. We all want to live in safe communities. And they are the people who best know how to keep these communities safe. It is them, not us, who should be the ones who have the final purview over their municipal and county police department budgets. We also know that there are many reasons that governments make changes in how they plan their budgets. As Representative Holcomb, we were reminded a moment ago, in the summer of 2019, the governor decided to cut 10% of the state's budget, a decision that was not predicated in any way on any revenue shortfalls that were anywhere close to 10%. This bill prohibits cities and counties from reducing their budget beyond 5% of the past fiscal year's appropriations. 5% is an arbitrary figure that is not based on any analysis of local government budgets, and it artificially and unnecessarily ties the hands of the locally elected officials to make any necessary budget decisions that reflect the priorities of the communities they represent. Ensuring the public safety is absolutely a responsibility of local elected officials. Ensuring the public safety is absolutely a core responsibility of local elected officials. And I know firsthand that police budgets are reflective of input from the local government's elected officials, their law enforcement department, and the city or county taxpayers. And these decisions don't happen in a vacuum or behind closed doors. This is not a case of rogue local elected officials who are imposing their will upon the citizenry. Furthermore, budget hearings are required to be public meetings. These conversations are not happening behind closed doors. And if city officials or county officials propose a police department budget reduction that does not reflect the goals of their residents, believe me, they're the first people to hear about it. This bill is an unnecessary attempt to usurp local control. It is a reactionary bill that was put forward in response to isolated examples of cities' failed attempts to cut public safety funding, attempts that did not work for the precise reason that those local governments did work. The group of elected officials representing these various neighborhoods and communities that compose these cities voted to represent the wishes of those citizens. The legislation we discuss here in this chamber represents policy that will impact every city and county government in our state. If we pass this bill, our politics will transcend policy, and the consequence of that action would be that our local governments would be absolutely unable to truly represent their constituents' priorities. I urge you to vote against this utterly unnecessary bill, and I yield the balance of my time to the leader.
Chair recognizes the Minority Leader of the House, Leader Beverly, for the balance of the minority report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just for the sake of clarity, I have 2 minutes or 11 minutes. All right, thank you.
11.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. 10 years ago, I was fortunate enough to be elected to the General Assembly. And I sat right over there in that corner in front of Susan Holmes, next to Sam Watson and Jason Shaw and Amy Carter. Stacey Abrams was the leader. John Burns had brown hair. And I might add that Speaker Ralston had brown hair as well. My hair was black, somewhat curly, and today it is obviously gray, and I do my own stunts because I cut my own hair now due to COVID. Barack Hussein Obama was the president of the United States of America. And Donald J. Trump was a game show host. Every Republican that I sat beside, every day that I was over there said to me, local control, local control, local control, home rule, home rule, home rule. As a matter of fact, I really believe when we picked up these bills and you look at the top number, it says LC number, I thought that stood for local control. And when you did House resolutions, the HR number, I thought that actually meant home rule. Because it was ingrained in my psyche in a corner where Wendell Willard said, if you have to stand in that well for more than 90 seconds, you've already failed. And Randy Nix would pull out his stopwatch and we'd all count and watch it come down, and he'd come back and say, it was 86 seconds, boys, how did I do? But that was 10 years ago. A lot of things have changed in 10 years. Today I find myself in the General Assembly where the Democrats are talking about local control and home rule. Where a year ago, a gentleman by the name of Ahmaud Arbery was murdered on the coast. 90 days later, a man named George Floyd was in Minneapolis. He was on the ground, police department, maybe he was a road cop, I don't know. Knelt on his knee, on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds until he died. 8 minutes, 46 seconds. About the time I'm going to be in this well. And he died. And the issue was not around whether we should defund the police. It was around not having accountability for a police department that went rogue. It's never about us not wanting to have public safety. Of course we want safety in our neighborhoods. But when we find that we have no redress whatsoever, what should we do? Should we continue to go down the road of the people who put their knees on our neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds and allow us to die? Or do we go to a higher authority within the governing body that guides our principles? And that higher authority sometimes is the sheriff's department. Why? Because we can elect the sheriff. We can say if you're gone rogue, we're not going to have a police department that you appoint, but we'll vote for the people who police our department through a sheriff's department. And it was evident in Glenn County last year, in August, September of last year. Glenn County wrestled with that idea because of Ahmaud Arbery. I was also admonished in that corner, which is where I learned a lot, is that don't go chasing waterfalls. Don't seek the headlines. If you're seeking them, you've already lost. If you're doing what's right, and sometimes if you're doing what's wrong, the headlines will find you. But don't chase the headlines. And more importantly, if you're going to make legislation, make sure that you do legislation that will stand the test of time. Hopefully you'll end up in the Constitution of the state of Georgia, which is where I want to bring my remarks to. The Constitution of the state of Georgia, and I'll read this for you, Article 9, Section 2, Paragraph 1F, says this. the governing authority of each county is authorized to fix the salary, compensation, and expenses of those employed by such governing authority and to establish, maintain retirement or pension systems, etc. It's very specific. This is the Constitution. Article 9, Section 2, Paragraph 1F. Constitution gives the local authority the ability to fix salaries. What we're trying to do in this moment is say the General Assembly has more power than the Constitution of the state of Georgia. Now, we know that there's one idea around these headlines that we grab. I say Black Lives Matter, then you say all lives matter. I say defund the police, you say back the blue. It's the nature of the politics that we live in. But while the public is bouncing from one foot to the next, we have reclaimed an awesome responsibility of being able to speak truth to power for what we legislate. And if we allow the headlines to drive anything that we do in this body, then we already lost our way. Now, Mr. Speaker, I know back in those days, 10 years ago, Democrats used to get 1 or 2 bills out. And I would like for you to reconsider that. But today, we don't, which is fine. But the reality of this bill right now is a headline-chasing bill. It doesn't honor the Constitution that we stand on, 86 pages. Read it. And so this bill, if it's passed, seeks to trump the Constitution. So if you're going to grab a headline, try that one on for size. Republican bill trumps Georgia Constitution. Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. We're going on now to the chairman's time. Chair recognizes the chairman of the committee, Chairman Darlene Taylor, for the chairman's time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I share with you that the House fully vetted House Bill 286. It was vetted by both the Governmental Affairs Full Committee and our General Government Subcommittee. They reviewed that and they identified a number of things in the bill. For one thing, there's a distinct difference between a sheriff's department, which is a constitutional officer, and police departments. This bill offers consistency in law enforcement funding for Georgia citizens in that it continues reasonable funding for police departments within our state. The bill includes exceptions for revenue decreases at the local government while still allowing for police protection for the citizens. This bill is a citizen protection bill. The measure was passed by a bipartisan support within this committee. Mr. Speaker, I yield back my time to the Majority Whip.
Chair recognizes the Majority Caucus Whip, Representative Kelly, for a portion of the chair's time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I haven't been here 10 years like my friend, the Majority Leader, or my friend, the Minority Leader. Maybe that's why my hair is not quite as white as theirs. But I have been here 9 years. And I wish we could get back to a time like I was here 9 years ago. A time when supporting our law enforcement community and supporting those who keep us safe wasn't such a political and partisan issue. It really shouldn't be. I'm thankful for the law enforcement officers who stand outside these doors and keep us safe. I'm thankful for the ones in Washington who are there to protect our members that are serving in Washington. I'm thankful for the ones who are in our local counties, who are protecting our constituents while we're here doing the people's work. I'm thankful for the ones in our cities, those right outside the steps of this Capitol here in our state's capital city. I'm appreciative of them. This issue is too important, much too important to be emotional, much too important to be hysterical. and much too important to be dishonest. So I want to clear up some inaccuracies about what we're doing today. When a city or a county has a revenue shortfall, whether that's because their population is declining or because we've hit a tough economic time, this bill has a provision that will allow them to respond. This bill does not violate the home rule provisions of our Constitution. We've gotten that clear from Legislative Council. We talked a lot about what we had to do as a state when we were going through a tough economic time. We would be treated the same way that any local government would. You have to prioritize. There's nothing here that keeps a local government from being able to cut their entire budget, but only simply the part that deals with law enforcement. And only if the revenue drops have not happened. If revenue's increasing or revenue's the same, that's when we say don't cut law enforcement. Don't expose your communities to being unsafe. We did cut our state budget 10%. But what we didn't do is we didn't cut state law enforcement, because we did what we ask our constituents all across the state to do. Put your priorities down on paper, just like they have to do in their budgets at home. We took a vote as a body where we continued to fund law enforcement. Now, we also took another vote during this time. It was another bill that my friend from Athens, Clark County carried. It was a bill that said while we're cutting our state budget, we're also going to take a pay cut. I find it ironic that the minority party didn't want to cut our pay, but here they are today hoping that the local governments will cut our law enforcement's pay. We're getting to see where people's priorities are. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud for the measure that my friends brought here, and I look forward to having the support of a bipartisan measure that came out of committee on the floor today. I'll yield the well.
Chair recognizes the author of the bill, Representative Gaines, to conclude the chair's time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I just want to conclude by responding to a few points that were brought up in the argument here on the floor this afternoon. The first being local control, and I do support local control and believe that is something that this General Assembly supports. But when we have local governments that are out of control and putting lives at risk in our state, we have to step in. And I live in a community that has considered cutting 50% of its police budget. We have to step in. Lives are at risk in communities that are making those sort of proposals. And so that is what this bill addresses, and I believe it's an important step. And another point that was brought up said that this isn't happening in our state. This is a headline bill. It is happening in our state. The city of Atlanta looked at cutting $73 million last year. It only failed by one vote on the city council. Athens, Clark County has looked at cutting 50% of its police budget. That very well could come up for a vote again this year. So this is something that is happening and that cities and counties in our state are considering. You know, another point that Whip Kelly just addressed, there is flexibility in this legislation if there's revenue losses, if there's a court order to provide new services. We've worked through exceptions to make sure if there's responsible reasons for reducing spending in police that our cities and counties have the ability to do that. Another point that was brought up was mental health, and I believe we've got to invest in mental health, and this General Assembly has done that, and I would encourage cities and counties across our state to invest in mental health. But we can't do that at the expense of public safety. Finally, someone brought up unintended consequences. The unintended consequences of not passing this legislation are lives that we might lose by cutting public safety, putting families at risk. That's the unintended consequences if we don't pass this legislation. You know, to be honest, when I introduced this bill and brought it forward, I didn't think this was a partisan issue, and I'm disappointed that it's become one, because supporting our law enforcement is something we should all do, and I hope, Mr. Speaker, that we pass this legislation to protect Georgia families. I yield the well and ask for your favorable consideration of this legislation.
Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. What purpose does the majority leader of the House rise?
Parliamentary inquiry,
State your
Mr. Speaker.
inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, isn't it true that while we've been sitting here debating this bill, that I received a request from my district to write a letter seeking grants to support the training of local law enforcement and their efforts to make sure that those members of local law enforcement are adequately trained in the use of force, de-escalation training, crisis intervention training, crisis negotiating training. Mr. Speaker, isn't it true that what we're doing here now will further deter from our local governments being able to provide adequate training for our law enforcement and our public safety folks to protect our citizens? And we should support this bill.
If the gentleman so states, I know he believes that to be true. What purpose does Representative Anulowicz rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is it not true that of the two cities, I believe it's Atlanta and Athens, that have proposed reducing funding to their police departments, those were isolated incidents, and they did not pass because the councils worked and represented their people? We did not want to cut the funding?
I think that is a matter that will address itself to the judgment of each and every member. What purpose does Chairman Jay Collins rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that my 89-year-old granddad lives back home, and if somebody is trying to attack him, I want somebody to send a police officer, not a social worker, to protect him?
I'm sure the gentleman believes in that very intensely. What purpose does Representative Cannon rise?
Parliamentary
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that this bill exempts up to 100 county police forces on lines 49 and 50? Additionally, is it not true that in the conversation around calling 911 for help is something that we can all get behind, but we recognize in today's America, people across the state of Georgia cannot call 911 and not end up in a grave?
If the lady so states, I know she believes that to be true. Final parliamentary inquiry. What purpose does the Minority Caucus Whip, Representative Wilkerson, rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that after today's debate, we can all rest assured that we all believe in public safety and want to support our local communities, and that instead of passing bills, the best possible measure may be for that we get the qualifying information so that everybody in this chamber can run for the local government that they so intend to run from this chamber?
I'm sure the gentleman believes that to be true. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of House Bill 286. The ayes are 101, the nays are 69. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. The clerk will read the caption to a group of privileged resolutions.
Commemorating and saluting the abundant life and public service of Representative Charles Jenkins. Honoring the life and memory of William Ray Morgan, Sr. Honoring the life and memory of Wallace T. Coopwood. Honoring the life and memory of Sergeant Patrick David Rick Snook. Honoring the life and career of Captain Stanley Curtis Elrod. Recognizing and congratulating Ralph Wilson. Recognizing February 26, 2021 as Rare Disease Day in Georgia. Commending the Georgia peanut industry and recognizing March 1st, 2021 as Peanut Butter and Jelly Day at the state capitol. Commending the Georgia Association of Educators upon its occasion of its 154th anniversary. recognizing and commending the Chattahoochee Marin Forestry Unit on being named the Georgia Forestry Commission 2020 North Georgia Unit of the Year. Recognizing and commending Kirk J. Jarrett, and for other purposes, that completes the reading of the privilege resolutions.
Is there any objection to adopting the privilege resolutions? The chair hears none, and the resolutions are adopted. For what purpose does Chairman F. Stration rise?
Make a motion.
State your motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the rules of the House be temporarily suspended so that a bill may be read for the first time and assigned to committee.
Clerk will read the caption.
Unnumbered House Bill by Representative Leverett of the 33rd and others, being titled an act to amend Title 15 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to courts, so as to provide that each judge of the Superior Court, State Court, and Probate Court, and each magistrate shall have the authority to perform any lawful judicial act.
On the gentleman's motion that the rules of this House be temporarily suspended to allow a bill to be read for the first time and assigned to committee, is there objection? Is there objection? The chair hears none, and it is so ordered. Judiciary. All right, we're going on now to announcements. If you have signed up for an announcement, be at the front of the chamber and be ready to go. Chair recognizes Chairman Cooper for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The meeting of the House Health and Human Services Committee for today will be canceled. The meeting of the House Health and Human Services Committee that was supposed to start at 12:30 is canceled for today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Chairman Lynn Smith for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. There is a House Natural Resource and Environment Committee meeting tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, room 606. We'll be taking up one bill. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Drenner for an announcement. Chair recognizes Chairman Newton for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Special Committee on Access to Quality Health Care will meet today in room 515 in CLOB. We'll be meeting at 2 o'clock, 5:15. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Chairman Werkheiser for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Industry and Labor will meet today at 3 o'clock, room 506, both in person and Zoom. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Chairman Collins for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee, Subcommittee A, will meet at 1 o'clock, 506 CLOB. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Gunner for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Gunter Subcommittee of Judiciary is going to meet in CLOB 406 at 3:30.
Chair recognizes Representative Jasmine Clark for an announcement. Chair recognizes Representative Gullett for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Governmental Affairs Full Committee will be meeting today at 2 o'clock, room 406 of CLOB. Governmental Affairs Full Committee, 2 o'clock, CLOB. Thank you so much.
Chair recognizes Chairman Watson for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the Rural Caucus, if you'll listen up, lunch is being brought over here from Twin Towers. You can pick up your lunch, box lunch, in room 245. I know committee meetings are going to start meeting, so the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences is our host today, and they provided box lunches if you can pick them up in 245. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Drenner for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a reminder that the DeKalb House and Senate joint meeting will happen upon adjournment, and you can pick up your lunch in room 514 of the CLOB. Thank you.
That completes our announcements. The chair recognizes the Majority Leader of the House for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move that this House stand adjourned till 10 a.m. Thursday, February 25th, 2021.
Majority Leader has moved that this House be adjourned until Thursday, February 25th at 10 a.m. All those in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. This House will be adjourned until Thursday at 10 a.m.